There you are. That's better.
This chair's
big.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Carolina. It's
Hello.
an honor to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome to This Is Not BS.
And it's an honor to have the privilege of being your friend for 5 years now.
5 years and counting.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, if we make it to 7, that means it's a lifetime. We'll be lifetime friends.
You know what's the one thing I love about Carolina is that we can spend maybe 3 to 5 months with no words whatsoever. We don't talk to each other. And then one text, hey, how are you? And it's like we never stop talking.
Yeah. Those are good friendships.
Those are good friendships. Do you remember the first time we met? What were we doing?
No, I don't.
You were in rehearsal. 2016 in Cielos Abiertos. And you were singing. And she stopped singing. She has an amazing voice, and she stopped singing, and she comes down, and I had Joshua, and she's like, hi. And I said, you have an amazing voice. And I said, you sing like Amanda Cook. That's her last name.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, you're so sweet. And
Yeah.
I was like,
Nowhere close to her, but thank you.
Yeah. But we wanted to do this with you because you are a preacher's kid, a pastor's kid. So so we wanted to ask you about how was it for you growing up as a pastor?
Oh man. Yeah, so I've had to kind of like open up a Pandora's box of feelings in the last few weeks of what it's felt like.
Yeah.
So I grew up in church my whole life. My parents were not ministers before. They've been ministers for I think about 20 years now. I think. And we just grew up in church. They served at different churches growing up when we lived in Washington, D.C. and moved down here in Georgia, and have always been involved in church. So when it came time for them, they felt called to become pastors, and that was it. So, I mean, we've always been involved in church, from cleaning the bathrooms, from being part of Sunday school, from picking up people at church, being up late at night, waking up extra early before everyone. It's been a whirlwind.
And you are you an only child, or do you have siblings?
3. We're all 3. I'm the oldest. I have 2 younger brothers. They also serve at my parents' church as well. I go to a separate church now. And I've been going to Open Heavens Church, or Cielos Abiertos, for about almost 10 years. So, I mean, I actively serve there. But I would say probably my whole life, I kind of grew a little resentful for being a PK, to be honest. Just because it's like, you really don't have time for anything else but the church, but everyone else. And then like your family, and, you know, it just kind of doesn't come last, but everybody else's needs always comes first before yours. And I think coming from a pastor's kids, like, at least on my end, in my experience, I felt like our needs kind of felt back because other people had needs being called, my parents being called all the time, needing prayers, needing somebody to go help them, take them to the doctor, take them to the hospital, just small things like that. And my parents are never the ones to say we can't. So it's just what comes with it.
Do you think that had to do with you going and not being with them in the same ministry?
Yes. So back in, I would say probably in 2017 is when I started to slowly pull away from the church, only because I didn't know my identity and what I guess I felt like the label of being a PK, you had to be perfect, you had to be good, you couldn't like be disrespectful, you couldn't speak up your mind. And I felt like I was just trying to find my identity in who I was. And just like the very stereotypical pastor's kids is they're always the rebels. They're always the one who gets into trouble. And I really tried my best not to do that. But I think probably I was like about 18 and I hit my breaking point and I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to pull away. If people are going to think certain things about me, say certain things about me, I'll just give them a reason to talk. That was just me being a rebel. And
are you still a rebel?
I think I am. I really take pride in who I am and the things that I've like, you know, just gone through and have overcome. I think you can be a rebel in good ways. I think you can like, you know, wear the things that life has like given you, and whether if they were bad, like you can just wear them on your sleeve and be non-apologetic about it.
Yeah.
But I think back then I just didn't know what that looked like for me.
Yeah. So when you say that you started pulling away because you didn't know exactly who you were, like what was your aha moment where you were like, this is not letting me get to the point where I need to be? Because you're big on self-discovery and self-growth. And that's one thing I love about you. And I told you that we were going to talk about this. So what was your one aha moment?
Yeah, I think I've always been like that as a kid. I've always just like wondered like on just the bigger picture of life and people and myself. And I think for like in my big aha moment was probably in, like, as they always say, like your darkest moments are when you're just really trying to find a way out. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I pulled away from church. I was away and I thought, I'm like, I'll just give people a reason to talk. And I did, and didn't care about it. But it got to a point to where I felt probably like around in 2013, where I just pretty much felt so sad, just very sad, very lonely. And I had all the friends. I'm a social butterfly. So I was going out, I was having fun, I was traveling, I was doing so many things, meeting new people, but I still felt empty. I still felt lonely. I felt like I didn't know where I was going in life, like as far as what my next thing was. And like you said, like I'm always like self-discovery, what's next? And I felt like I don't know a way out of this funk. Like, how do I get out of this? Mm-hmm. So I slowly started going to church. And I just felt called back to going to church. But I told myself, I'm like, God, I'm not going to get involved in church again. That's a no for me. I'm just going to go because this is what I know. This is what I know will feel right for me. I'm just going to go feed my soul. I'm not going to meet people. I don't care to talk to people. This is just you and me. Like, you know, and then I realized that, you know, going to church and growing up in church, you know, I didn't really know who God was. I had never encountered Christ until 2013. It took me about I was 22, you know, to find out, like, you know, to understand the Holy Spirit, to get full understanding of like forgiveness and surrendering everything. It's not just a thought. It's not just how people are using these days, manifesting things, because I don't believe in that. I really believe, like, you know, that God does, you know, these great things because I've experienced them. Mm-hmm. I know I couldn't have done it without him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're big on that.
Yeah, I'm big on, you know, I have a question before I get into that. So I think a lot of people have kind of felt the way that you felt, in the sense of like coming back to church and like not wanting to participate, or I say participate, but being involved in the mission capacity, especially for pastors' kids. Like there's so much pressure that's on you to be this perfect person and do all of these things. And even like from the parent standpoint too, like I mean, we have Joshua and Caleb, and I hope that we don't put that pressure on them that is like we got as we were growing up.
Like today in the restaurant. Carolina, this kid, oh my gosh, he was pushing my buttons today in the restaurant. I really hope we don't do that with him growing up in his life, because if not, it's gonna be a pain.
I think
with Joshua?
Yeah. I really do my best to teach him right from wrong. And it's like every time, just as being a father, every time like we have a teaching moment, it'll be like a couple of hours later, I'll sit there and go, oh man, I should have done this, or I should have said it this way, or this is going to leave a lasting effect. And like going into, you know, what you're talking about, I think it's, everybody has this moment, I think, where they are going to choose to either like live for Christ or they're going to walk away from it. Mm-hmm. And most people don't come back from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's very unfortunate. I mean, I have a lot of friends that grew up like, you know, I grew up in a church that was very religious. Oops, sorry. Hello. Hi.
Yeah, you're still there.
Okay.
We can still see you.
Yay. Okay. So I grew up like in a church that was very religious, very conservative. You know, everybody, somebody that did something wrong, it was the talk of the church, you know, and a lot of friends now that I have seen, that I have grown up with, I would say almost all of them left the church. Very few have either like moved to a different church, like denomination. Most of them, they're just living their lives. And I wouldn't say I don't blame them. You know, it's just very unfortunate. And I honestly, somebody asked me the other day, like, you know, would you, if you had a choice to go back and like redo, like, I guess like how you were brought up, like in church, would you redo it again? I was like, no, like, you know, it's just, I don't know what life is outside of it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not interested in knowing anything else outside of it either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like you were saying, I can think of right now a lot of people that I grew up with, and going to church and youth group and all sorts of stuff, and I don't think any of them even attend church or even, you know, go through the stuff that we went through growing up, come back to serving or anything. Mm-hmm. Not that I've talked to them in years, but you know, when you follow people on social media and stuff, and they post everything about their lives, you can see that their walk and what they used to talk don't line up anymore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's sad.
Yeah. So like all of us were PKs, and I think that when you grow up as a PK, you have one lesson. Like you get to your 20 years, 25 years, and you're like, this is the one thing I learned about being a preacher's kid. What would you say it's your lesson?
There's so many. There's so many.
But one that you always come back to. Like there is one that
I think the number one thing is putting family first, regardless. Mm-hmm. Family first above everything. Yeah. I think like in ministry, you can lose sight of like, you can just lose your family. Mm-hmm. Not just lose your family, like they leave, but just lose like relationships with them. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, you guys can still work together and like serve God, but really lose touch of like, you know, each other as a family member. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's important, is continue to cultivate. I think, you know, God has called like, you know, man and woman to be one and then procreate. And your first ministry is your family. And I think like, as like, as any kind of minister that can be, I think it's just so easy to get caught up in it and get lost in serving others and giving to others and giving to the church and giving your time to the church and to other people that need you, where you feel like your family's okay, like even though you're all still together, you serve together, but it's sometimes there's things that that each and every one like needs you more, like you guys need each other on a different level than just ministry wise and just serving together.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree on that, because you still can have brothers, sisters, mom, dad, but the relationship is not there, and it's mainly just work. Yeah. What would you say it's yours?
So my dad, I guess, like whenever I've really ever needed advice, and he and I will talk, even just as a little kid, until this day, I still, every time somebody recites this in church or repeats it, I always hear, live one day at a time by faith, because you can't control tomorrow. You can plan for tomorrow and do things, but ultimately God has a plan. Because I could be dead and gone tomorrow and the earth is going to still spin. God still sits on the throne and all those things. But I can only control what I can control today.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the one thing for me that was just a reminder that stuck with me all these years.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
I think I'm on the side with Carolina, like family first, because I can still have siblings, mom, dad, but if you do not take the time to nurture the relationship, it's just like, and sometimes I say I don't like working with family, and sometimes I say I love working with family, but really it's just a thing that you really have to think through, right? So it's interesting that you said that at 22 you had that point of like just going and see what's going on by yourself and leaving your family. And I wrote, without knowing, 22 years old. I'm not lying.
That's so funny.
3 things you would say to your 22-year-old self.
That's so funny.
I know, I'm not lying. You see that? Yeah.
Oh man. 22-year-old self.
I'm trying, like, you remember back to where you were when you were 22? Like, what?
No, I remember. I think I had a lot of doubts then at 22, just doubting if this is what God really wants for me, if even getting involved into church. I was so scared, absolutely so scared to get involved again. So I think one thing that I would tell my 22-year-old self would be to let go of fear, which is something I still tell myself almost every day. And really truly believe that God really has greater things than you have for you. Because I mean, I've seen it, I've lived it, not that I ever doubted it, but I've been able to experience, just his goodness and how, great, it's been to just fully trust him when, people didn't agree. Like coming back to church, my parents didn't, it's funny. They weren't okay with me not being away from church. And then they weren't okay when I came back to church.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't their church. So there was a lot of like growing pains from that for both of us. I mean, they were happy for me, but I think they were hopeful that, because my journey was like, I told them, I want to get better. I want my spiritual life to grow. And I need to do this without you guys. Like that was me, like just trying to be very independent and not trying to like lose my spiritual identity behind them as pastors and in their church. And I really wanted to find it for myself and wanted to know what God had for me. So you know, it was a struggle. It was a struggle because I mean, my parents did see like a big transformation in my life. They saw a big transformation where, you know, my attitude changed, the way how I address things, the way how, you know, I spoke to them, you know, and that was just all God. I knew it was all God. The way how I processed things and went to them, like, you know, and told them, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Like, not because I owed them anything, but it was just more of like, I wanted advice. And they thought, it was like, oh, you're good now, you're ready to come back. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not ready. You know, I think like in the back of their head as parents, you know, it's just as parents, like, you know, they just felt like, you know, that she looks like she's ready. And it's like, my heart is not, my heart is still healing. You know, I still need to nurture it and nurture my soul. And, you know, coming back and serving, was, I would say, a very hard decision, you know, but I had to trust God. I had to trust him. And I knew that I wanted to believe that he had great things. And I had to test that for myself, not for him, because I wasn't going to be like, well, do you really have it? No, I had to test it for him, like for myself, so I could really experience, you know, the changes that he had for me. Mm-hmm. Which has all been great.
Yeah. And what are the other two? Or the three of them more compounded in one?
I would say let go of fear, trust, run towards him. Like run towards him. Like, don't be scared to run towards him. Another one. Brace yourself. Brace yourself.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think that when, like, even though if you're 22 or 32, like, I think you all always get to face fear and the lack of trust and not knowing if everything is going to unfold the way that you think it's going to, but just trust that it's going to be better than what you think. I think it's the best way to go. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had to deal with like a moment, even a split of a second, be like, all of this is just fake, this is not working for me?
I wouldn't say to that extent. I mean, it does get exhausting sometimes, but then like I always come back to, it's like, I know what life was without church and without being involved in church. I don't care to know what it would be like again.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It was a good break, but honestly, it's just not it's not consistent. And I feel like consistency is so important. It is so important in life and how you do life in general. So I think putting that into walking in Christ and being involved in church, that does play a role with how, you know, consistent you are in other things in life too. How faithful you are in your own church also, you know, I think plays a role in how faithful you are in other things outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree to that. What do you say?
I just have a question about so, you know, you talked about when you're growing up and kind of a little bit about what that was like for you. Did your siblings ever share that same thing, or did you have cousins that also grew up in the church that you were around?
Yeah, I have cousins. I mean, most of us did, and some of them, they don't go anymore. My brothers still serve at church. They serve at my parents' church. I mean, mostly from my brothers, whenever we talk about it, I mean, we don't get to that conversation. We've never had a conversation if they ever feel burnt out or if they ever, question it. I think, they've just gotten used to it. And
what about, were you ever around like other pastors' kids? Like, did your parents ever do like conferences and stuff and you be around other kids that were also PKs?
yes. Yeah. So we had, when we lived in Washington, D.C., we had other churches that we would get together and do other conferences. Like, I think it was like every 3 months or 4 months or something. And again, like, I mean, it was fun, but I mean, I don't have any relationships with them. I mean, there's a very few that I still talk to.
Right.
But as far as like what their experience was, whatever I do see online, whatever I do see, I actually connected with a friend of mine that I hadn't seen her since I was like 15 or so. And we kind of caught up. She's in her mid 20s, mid to late 20s. And, she ended up mentioning to me that she left the church and she just realized that just wasn't for her. And she said her parents kind of struggled with it at the beginning, but they got used to it. They accepted it. And I find it unfortunate because, it's just I feel like everyone that grows up in a church should recognize that they have a calling. And they just don't know how to get there or are afraid to get there.
Yeah. Totally understand that. And then like for people, because there's some people who are going to watch this who aren't pastors' kids, and they may not ever feel that pressure that we've been under when it comes to being a pastor's child, and being in service like that. But if there is anybody watching this who's going to have some sort of takeaway from this, I think everything that you shared so far has been really uplifting and great, as well as you, Stephany. But I also, like, there was a time where I remember probably when I was like 16, 17, I left home at a young age, and I remember being put in this church or going to this church that was very opening and accepting to me. And I felt that same burnt out feeling that, you're doing so many different things, and you feel like what you're doing is being called for a purpose. Did you have people along the way that are like mentors or mentorship that you sought through during that time that, for example, I've had people all along my life come alongside me when I've done something in front of other people, whether it's leading worship or talking to someone and gives them inspiration. They're like, oh, you're supposed to be a pastor, or you're supposed to be a worship leader, or you're supposed to be, and they put that specific category of a Christian label. Have you ever experienced something like that?
Plenty. Plenty of times.
Do
you want to know how that makes me feel when somebody ever tells me that?
Yeah.
I kind of like choke.
You're like, never.
You can't say never. You can't say never. I mean, I think I've learned from my pastor is like, before when I started going to church, and he would tell me like, you're going to be a pastor, or you're going to be a minister, or do this and that. And at that time I'd be like, no, I'm not. You're crazy. There's no way. Like, I was so turned against it. And I feel, and like, he taught me one thing. He's like, the more you say no, the more you turn away God's blessings of what he has for you, and you reject those. So then when it's time that you want them, you won't be able to obtain it because you've rejected it for so long. Like, you've made it a reality. And then that made sense. Like, when I was younger, I would obviously, like, in your 20s, I knew I wasn't ready to be a mom. And I would, people would say, wait till you have kids. And I'd be like, no, ew. and then I think about it now, like, if I kept projecting that, like, you don't know, like, what if I was meant to be a mom, and then the time came to be and I'm not able to, because I rejected that desire that God wanted for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
it does.
So I think, like, as far as like mentors that play a good role in my life, I would say it'd be my pastor. I don't really have to open up to him about everything.
yeah.
I think, like, I can just say, like, just small little things, or he can just look at me and God can just tell him, and he has a gift of discernment. So God can just tell him right then and there, and doesn't even have to tell him exactly everything, and will just give him a word to give me. And I think that means a lot to me, is the fact that you don't have to tell somebody everything and they know. And that's how you know that God is real, is the fact that God knows everything about you, knows what you're feeling, knows what you're experiencing. And yeah, you can unfold and tell, like, Stephany absolutely everything. But the fact that there's times that you don't have anyone to talk to, or like to tell them, like, this is what's going on. And then somebody can tell you, hey, like, you're going through this, like, whatever word that God gives them, like, then, it's like, that really was from God. So that I admire him for that. I really appreciate the fact that those are confirmations that I know that, God is real, and God sees the things that I do, the work that I've done. I don't expect to be recognized for it. But it feels nice to, when it's like time to where I need, kind of like some recognition, or I need some uplifting words from somebody who doesn't really have to know everything. That makes sense.
It does make sense.
And then I have my other mentor. Her name is Krista. She's been my mentor for the past couple years, and she's been in my journey as, like, in walking in singleness, and walking in, just self-growth, and trying to figure out, like, what God wants for me in the next, like, phase of my life, aside from just identifying as a worship leader, or just identifying as somebody that works, or potentially, like, not just live by being a single person. It's just, what does God have for me outside of that? So, I mean, she's been a great asset in my life to kind of figure that out as I walk through this journey. And it's been really great. And then I have, just a few close friends like Stephany. Like we said, we talk sometimes, and most of the times, like, we joke around, but then when it's time to, like, kind of, when I'm going through some things, I know I can just call her, text her, and, like, she's there to give me uplifting words, and vice versa. So
yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And when was that we texted? Like Friday, I think, when I was struggling, and she said, you should do this. And I was like, I never thought of that. I'll do it. So I think it's really good, like, when you recognize when God puts these people in your life, like your mentors and like your friends, and just recognizing that those people, those peoples are like divine encounters that you really need to, like, just grab them and keep them there.
Yeah.
And I really believe that happened to me as well. Like 5 years ago when I met you, I knew that was something that I needed to grab and keep you there for me. Just like when I saw you, I was like, yes, he's mine. And then I kept you. And
It's called irony sharpening iron.
and just like you and Mike, and that's another relationship that I see, like,
Yeah.
like a divine encounter.
So we, so our pastor, Pastor Mike, over at Urgent Church in Greensboro, North Carolina. You're welcome for the plug, Mike.
If you are in Greensboro and you need a church.
So he was at a church in Georgia when I was growing up, and I was leading worship at one church, and then for their youth group, I would come and play the bass for them, and he was our youth pastor there. And so when we moved to North Carolina, we were looking for a new home church, and my buddy Mike was the pastor here. And I remember that during COVID, like I was looking for different sermons to listen to and stuff, because we couldn't go to church. We couldn't go out of our buildings. We couldn't go see each other. Or, everything was online and, empty buildings. And I just remember watching a sermon that he had done. I was like, I wonder how he's doing. I've looked him up. And when I got here in North Carolina, I remembered, and we went, and the Lord just put on my heart. Sure enough, he was 20 minutes down the road, their church was. And so we went and reconnected there. And I believe that those divinely worked out by God way before anything else happened. Even for whatever the purpose is, we're still walking in it now, but there's definitely divine purpose in all things.
Yeah, and I have one last question, and this is the last one I have. I don't know if you have.
I have one more after you. Go ahead.
When you say my mentors, how did you decided that they were going to be your mentors?
Well, I think my pivotal point especially with my first interaction with Pastor, I felt like, so our first conversation that we had, in my head, I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna pour everything out to him. I'm gonna tell him this is what's going on. This is what's like my whole life outside of church, or just like me before coming here, is just like a mess. And I gotta tell him X, Y, and Z people, these people are in my life, and this is what's going on. And so that's how the conversation first started. We had met up at Waffle House, and I was literally in distress. Like, I felt like this is my last and only hope. I don't know who to talk to. And I'm literally about to burst in just like an emotional like wave of anxiety and sadness. And so he goes, he has there's 3 shakers, like, no, it was 2. It was a salt and pepper shaker and then like a mug. And then like I start naming like, both my mom and my dad. And then he's like, hold on. Before we start anything, he's like, just an example, like, we're not, this is your mom, this is your dad, and I'm over here trying to find something else, and this is you. We're going to put them to a side and we're going to talk about you. And that just changed my whole like perspective of everything. I realized that, not that they weren't the issue, but like I went there to just literally talk awful, like, just vent. And he's like, wait, we're not going to talk about them. This is not what we're going to do. He wasn't interested about like, my mess and my family, not in a bad way. And I think that's what just comes back to God. God doesn't care about your mess, doesn't care about anybody else's mess. All he cares about is you and having that relationship with you. And that was a pivotal point to where it's like, all right, so this is what I need from somebody to kind of like rein me back in. And that's been, the reason why I felt that was my first and only interaction where I knew, okay, he's going to be in my life, like until it's time.
Yeah.
And with Krista, she came into my life also at a time when I was in despair of like not knowing, I wouldn't say not knowing my identity, but just not knowing what was the next thing that God had for me. I felt like I had kind of, I wouldn't say aged out of a lot of things in ministry. I don't think you ever can, but I think you can get complacent in the routine of things. And I felt like, God in 2013, God completely healed my heart. I will definitely say that. I came from a background of, going through sexual abuse, being emotionally abused, physically abused. Like, I came from a background of that, to where in 2013, I learned to forgive. I learned to let go of that. But then, like, a few years ago, I felt like God was really wanting me to kind of dig in deeper into that, because he knew I was ready for it. Not because, like, we're trying to open up wounds or trying to open up, like, things that he hasn't worked through. I really do believe that he did heal me. I have no resent, at all. But I felt like he really wanted me to dig into that, to kind of break generational curses and generational trauma, for my own well-being and what's to come. I think, like, that's my next step. So running into Krista handles, she's a Christian mentor. She founded a nonprofit. It's Defined with Purpose, and works with young women, kids that were physically, sexually abused. And I didn't feel like at that time that I needed it. I needed to talk about it, but I felt like there was a reason why we had kind of just met. And it's been a good journey, just learning. There's been a lot of, like, wounds and underlying things that I didn't know I was, struggling with, and I didn't know that I was kind of putting it out there, because it just came normal to me. But I felt like, God is, like, has called me to kind of dig in deeper into those little crevices, just so I know, what he has for me after that.
Yeah, I love that. It's just there. I love it.
It's a beautiful story. It's a work of art that he's created with you. The last question that I have. So everybody that comes on the show, Stephany and I, in our first couple of episodes, we talk about this, and we throw around this word a lot, but we really mean it when we talk about it. We talk about our legacy and what we want to leave behind, not just for our children, but for the people after us. There's a lot of legacy that gets thrown around, and whatever that is, to each to their own. But if you have ever thought about the legacy that you want to leave behind, or what you want to be remembered for, what does that look like to you?
I would always like to be known as being the one that doesn't settle.
Oh, that's good.
The one that doesn't settle.
That sounds like Carolina.
That's really good. In everything, in life. I think there's always more than what you can ever imagine.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfect.
I feel like my life changed.
No.
That's good.
I love it. In everything, absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Caro, don't settle for anything.
Don't settle.
For anything.
For anything. No.
Wow, you inspire me.
Absolutely don't settle.
Oh, I love it. I love it. You feel like you were in couples therapy?
A little bit, yeah. It was nice. It was very inspiring too. Yes. I've got, like, side notes and stuff that I'm creating in here for things I'm gonna do later. So that was very good. Yeah.
I am very proud to call you my friend.
Oh, I'm proud to call you my friend. Thanks. Thanks for letting me be a part of your life.
Of course.
And I'm glad to be her husband to sit here and watch you be friends with each other. It's very nice.
I'm gonna miss you for the wedding.
I'm gonna miss you too. I'm really gonna miss you. I really wanted to make, and then when I thought my brother's wedding was like Thanksgiving weekend.
Oh, that's why you're not.
But it's his wedding's the day after yours.
Wow.
I mean, you could come before the wedding after.
What if they have to do a rehearsal?
Oh, yeah, that's a lot.
You don't have to do your makeup again or change again. You just do the whole shebang.
Just sleep in it all and leave here.
Right? Hey, that wouldn't be the first time I've done that. So
no. Yeah, she's learned. She's not settling.
She's not.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Exciting. It's exciting.
But thank you so much for coming on
Thank
the podcast with us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for not taking a nap.
I mean, I don't know what time it is now. It is.
You can still catch it.
You can still have a 2-hour nap.
No, I do it at 5. So
She said it's ruined.
it's done. No, because there's that threshold. There's like that, that's like 5 o'clock is like a happy medium. It's not too early and it's not too late.
Yeah.
Like I think 6 o'clock, that's closer to bedtime now.
So you're going to bed at 7? No.
No.
I have one last question.
What is it?